Hey everyone, and welcome to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and I'm joined, as always, by Tim.
Make sure to check those right angles.
Tim, is it really bothering you that they kept calling a set square and this a triangle?
Yes, I did not like that.
It was bothering me. I'm like, who are these people who call a set square a triangle? I mean, I know it is a triangle technically, but
Yeah.
it's a set square. Anyway, we talk about horror movies.
I think in the States we call it, isn't it a protractor? I think that's what we always, or is that something different?
I don't know. Well, if it's a US term, I don't know I've never heard of it. So
I think protractors are what we usually call there, or maybe it's similar. I don't know.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it's either way, it was weird.
Yeah, it's got a set square in the UK at least. Which is why it was bugging me, because it's set in the UK, it's set in goddamn Wales, and even the Welsh guy is like, did you use the triangle? Did you use the triangle? I can't do a Welsh accent. I'm trying my best as I can't do it. Anyway, so yeah, we talk about horror movies, and we've already started talking about the movie, seemingly, but we're going to talk about You Should Have Left. And that's what I was feeling about 5 minutes into the movie. I should have left. So this is a Blumhouse film. We'll start spoiler free as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we go into spoilers. I don't know why. Like, the last time we did a Kevin Bacon horror movie, it was one of the worst movies we ever had the misfortune of reviewing. So I don't know why we had any hope that this would be good. Now, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm referring to The Darkness, of course. When I'm talking about this other Kevin Bacon horror movie, I'm talking about The Darkness. This is technically not as bad as that movie, because The Darkness had like bad editing, for example, and not just bad editing in a stylistic sense. Like, it had bad editing in the timings were just off and lines were getting cut short. Like, it had like just fundamental technical issues. This doesn't have that, so it's better than The Darkness. That's the high bar that I'm going to give to it.
Cool.
That's pretty much where my praise is going to end, though, if you indeed can call that praise. So, the premise of this one, before I let Tim run wild with his initial opinion, is that Kevin Bacon is married to Amanda Seyfried, and he's about 60, she's about 32 or something like that. She's in her early 30s. So it's like a 30-year gap in age, which is referenced multiple times. It was referenced in the trailer, which we just looked at like a week or two ago. And he's having kind of like jealousy issues because she's an actress and she's doing like sex scenes and stuff in her movies, and she's always on her phone like booking jobs and talking to her agent or other actors or stuff, and he's feeling a bit, alienated. So he suggests that they go away, and she's like, oh, I've got a few weeks before I need to start shooting in London, so we'll go somewhere in the UK and have a nice getaway. Also, there's a backstory where his like ex-wife, not really ex-wife, she died, but his prior wife died under mysterious circumstances, and there was a big trial, and many people look at him as like he's a murderer. Obviously he is claiming he's innocent, and Amanda Seyfried obviously believes him. They've got a daughter, and they go to a Welsh countryside kind of holiday home that they rent, and they spend time there, but creepy things start happening and danger might be afoot. All while, of course, the paranoia of, is my wife cheating on me with other people, bubbles at the surface. So that is the premise of You Should Have Left. Tim.
Yeah.
How did you feel about it?
Oh, I mean, this is like an absolutely train wreck. This is oh boy, this is really bad. Like, even by like typical, generic, boring Hollywood movies, that we review a lot of, I think this even stands out as being like, worse than those. Because it's just, there's nothing like interesting about this movie. I feel like it, doesn't really tell you anything about like the characters or the story, or has a point or knows what it wants to do, and it kind of just like, I feel like leaves it up to you to, put stuff together and try to figure out what is important. It's like all the stuff you're mentioning, about, the idea of like jealousy and, this being, this big age gap and stuff. Like, nothing really felt like like it feels like the movie's trying to make points, but it never actually does anything or goes anywhere with them. And then I feel like stuff just doesn't get explained, and I never really have any real like feelings for any of these characters. Like it's so weird. Like why would a young, attractive, successful actress be dating some random like banker that was accused of murder? like like how like it would make sense if he was like something like maybe like a director that, like if they wanted to make something like timely or irrelevant, like, why don't make it actually someone that's like famous or something for a reason, and maybe he has like allegations or something against him. Like something like that would make more sense versus just like how in the hell are they together? And yeah, it's real stupid. And man, I don't think I liked any part of it. Like the other things, like like the like freakiness of the house, it never actually like ever has any weight to it. Like nothing ever feels like really interesting or dangerous. And they also like do this really annoying thing where like it's so obvious when weird stuff is happening, but like, people never like really like acknowledge it or talk about it. Like a quick example, like one of the first things, that's kind of happens when like something's wrong is like the first night there, and his wife, Amanda, how do you say your last name? I always want to say Siegfried, but it's Seyfried.
Seyfried, yeah.
Seyfried, yeah, so like they're getting ready to like kind of like watch their like little TV show in bed before they fall asleep, and then he's like, oh, just go turn off all the light switches and stuff, and then like, he goes and he starts going down like these weird corridors and like kind of like getting lost and trying to figure out where switches are, what they do and when ones turn stuff off and what they're for. And then like when he finally gets back, it's obvious that he thinks he's only been gone for like a minute, but really he's been gone for like hours. But they play it out like so long and heavy-handed, like as an audience we all know like what happened, but they still like have to like tiptoe around it to the point where like, it finally does the big reveal where like it pans down and it shows the clock that like several hours has passed. It's like it felt so long and torturous, whereas like, yes, we know something freaky happened, like stop like trying to dance around it and act like oblivious. Like I don't know, it feels like insulting to the viewers in a way that actually really made me mad. But yeah, this is absolutely awful. I really hated this movie.
I mean, I can't really argue with a lot of that. Well, the only thing I would critique is your use of the word pan.
Well, whatever. I don't give a shit.
Like, I wasn't even going to mention it, but there was a whole I did a whole thing in the Ace where I corrected Tara, and I don't want to show favoritism, all right? So you can't pan down, all right? Just leave it there.
Well, I think you can. So
you can tilt down, you can't pan down. Just
agree to disagree.
So, right. Where did I want to begin? Yeah, the movie never does anything to I mean, not for the most part, you don't have to explain why couples are couples in movies, but this is such a weird pairing that it does feel weird that it never even has a throwaway line explaining how they met or how they ended up together or how this relationship became a thing. It's very odd, and it is such a huge age gap. Kevin Bacon is 60. It's not that people don't have these weird big age gap relationships, but it's right from the get go. There's this kind of, I don't know, like, he hears her on the phone right at the start of the movie when he's out by the pool, and he kind of looks almost annoyed that she's like paying attention to people on the phone and not him. And it's already kind of there. He's got this paranoia that he's not good enough for her, that he's too old, that he's this or that. And that side of the movie is not good. It's not entertaining, but it's actually the one that it spends more time on for the most part. And like, I would say it's thought out, but it feels like that's at least what it's focused on for a long time. Once it diverts into the more kind of freaky, supernatural, what's going on here stuff, all of that is just, it's weird that all of it feels tacked on, but it does kind of all feel tacked on, because when it makes its final point, and the way that characters just kind of brush over the weird things that happen, and you mentioned one, of course, with the time difference, but there's stuff later on where it gets proper, like, it's almost like they're in the Blair Witch at one point with the way it's playing with geography, and then the characters just kind of, like, I don't know, shrug it off. It's like, it's baffling. It's baffling.
Yeah, there, like, it doesn't feel like real characters to me. Like, there's I hate when movies do this. It's actually a big pet peeve of mine, where like people just don't talk to each other. Like, someone will say something and then it just gets like brushed aside. So again, like, another quick example is at one point, one of them is like, oh, like, yeah, you're the one that sent me the link to this house to rent it, and then the other one's like, I didn't send it, you sent it to me. And like, that's like, they just drop the conversation, like, that's it. Like, no, like, obviously something weird happened there, so why don't you talk about that and go, no, wait, seriously, I didn't send it, are you telling me that you didn't send it either? Like, that should be something that you both realize is weird, and then you talk about it. But instead it's a movie that they're just like, all right, we'll brush past it, but then, as a viewer, you're supposed to like notice it and be like, hey, wait a minute, that's weird. But it like drives me crazy. Like, and yeah, I think there's like, multiple instances in this movie where stuff like that is happening, and like, yeah, people are just not actually like sitting down and talking like normal people would. I mean, there's so much stuff to criticize too, but like, there's also like, there's a really big dumb reveal in the end that we'll go through in spoilers. That was super stupid, and then
to be honest, a lot of the freaky stuff, like, once you actually get to where the movie's going, a lot of the supernatural or freaky stuff doesn't even make a whole lot of sense. It just feels very random, totally, for the sake of having creepy things happen. Because once you know what it's been doing, it's kind of like, yeah, but how does that, how do these three things fit into that? And the truth is, they don't. Not even on a thematic level. It's not even like thematically they represent this thing. It's not at all. They're just there because it has to have something happening. The characters, the characters are kind of rough to get through. They're kind of one note as well, which is a big problem. And it's so weird because we have like known actors here. I mean, Kevin Bacon, okay, sure, like, he's obviously the bigger star of the movie, but at least, okay, he's at that age now where, okay, he's doing these crappy little horror movies. He's kind of past the peak of his career. But Amanda Seyfried, it feels like she's a relative name. So, like, why are these two? How did this movie get 2 stars like this? It's odd. It's common for them to like pay for the one big star, right? And Kevin Bacon, surprisingly, is also a producer on this, so he's getting an extra payday out of it. He's getting. I mean, I don't know if he's passionate about the project. I highly doubt it.
Well, that's the other thing I was wondering. Was like, there's probably like so many horror scripts out there. What was it about this one that like made someone say like, hey, this looks good, we gotta do this, let's greenlight this? Like,
well, I could give you the answer to that, Tim, because the writer is also the director, so that's why.
Right, David Koepp.
Yeah, Koepp. Yes,
Koepp. The genius that gave us the was it 2017 Mummy?
That is this is very same person, yes. Although it is based on a novel, so he clearly read this novel and thought it was the best thing he'd ever read, and thought, I'm going to do this.
I had never heard of it, but I do wonder if there's something to the novel. Like, maybe it is actually something that's really well written, and then it got passed around Hollywood, and people are like, oh, this has to be a movie, and then you just get untalented people to make it.
I mean, the sad part is that I can actually almost see, like, and again, I can't really talk about why until the spoilers, but I can actually see the nugget of a good idea deep down in there. Like, I can kind of see, like, if you actually focus on what the final point it's trying to make is, if it was actually all building up to that, I can kind of see what it was doing there. The problem is that it spends most of its time doing very generic horror movie stuff because it wants to be a Blumhouse horror movie that it has some cheap thrills and some cheap creepiness, so they can market it this way. When really what it wants to be is a psychological exploration of its main character. But that's not what it is at all. It just pretends that it was when it gets to the end.
Yeah, and I would say even like the generic stuff isn't handled well. Like, like there wasn't even any, I don't know, like cheap jump scares or some like, or like other stuff that usually kind of comes with these movies that is bad, but maybe at least might I don't know, make it a little more interesting or something. Like the, you know, 'cause the whole thing is like the house is like kind of freaky and it's doing weird stuff, but like none of the stuff ever feels like that menacing or creepy or scary. And it's also just kind of like weird stuff that the people notice. Like it'll, like a lot of it is just them being like, hey, this thing's going on, or this room's like this, but then it's like it doesn't mean anything, you know. Like it does, like most of it doesn't amount to much.
I think the even bigger problem, and this is something I have with a lot of modern horror movies, is that the pacing, or more specifically, the rate of escalation throughout the film is kind of non-existent. It just kind of it just sort of stays at the same kind of level for a lot of the movie, and then there's a moment where it feels like it's about to ramp up because something really weird starts happening, and then it feels like, I guess the best way to describe this, and I felt this a few times recently with movies, is that I'll look at the time on the movie and I'll realize, wait, I'm like an hour and 5 minutes into a 90-minute movie, so I've only got 25 minutes left, and yet it doesn't feel like it's ramping into its final act. It feels like I'm still being introduced to things. It feels like we're still in the slow build up. And if I'm at that point still, at that percentage way through the movie, not that movies are an exact science and it should always feel, the exact same at this time out of any movie, but not at all. But there's this growing trend with these horror movies where it feels like it barely actually ramps up to any kind of, I don't know, momentum and drive is such an important thing in a horror movie where it feels like it's always driving to whatever it's doing. It's always driving, to its next point. One scene always influences what the next scene is going to be. And there's so many scenes in this movie, and a lot of bad horror movies as well, where it's just the next scene because it's the next scene, not because the previous scenes actually set up the next scene, not because the previous scenes actually inspire where the characters go next, or because they inspire the actions that are taken in the following part of the story. Because good storytelling is that everything always feels like it's building from what came before. And this, like, there's so many horror movies we watch that it goes through the motions of the opening, and like some movies it might be family moves to a house, so they'll be doing random family things when creepy things start to happen. So most of the things happening are just random because they have to have them doing something before the creepy things happening. Whereas a good script, a good film, will have everything building to some kind of story. It'll be building, like, they'll use those scenes to establish the characters, to establish why they care about each other, so that when the creepy things do happen, there's stakes to why one why husband or wife cares about the other, or why they care about their children, or beyond just the blanket. Oh, obviously they care about them because they're their kids. This movie, doesn't obviously have that same formula. It's not that exact same thing, but it falls into a lot of the same trappings where we're just doing things because we have to be doing something.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and it feels very like mishandled. Like there's so many vague, like statements made about the characters and stuff that, but they don't really like emphasize it exactly to the point where, by the end when you are supposed to kind of start having these, revelations about characters, it doesn't mean anything because it feels like you're just learning about it now instead of being like, oh, okay, this was such a big important throughway throughout the whole movie, and I feel like a lot of stuff just happens at the end where it's like, and here you go, and it's like, oh, okay, so that's what this movie was about. All right.
And I think the other big problem with a lot of these types of horror movies, and this one especially, is that there's basically just like a what wacky way do I want to describe this? There's basically just like a failed Botox injection where there was supposed to be a tone.
Sure.
Like,
I get you.
I guess what I mean by that is, like, instead of actually having like a feeling, like a presence, like there's actually I guess what I'm saying is that it feels like sterile in a way that isn't like an intentional, like, because obviously some movies, like, oh, we're set in a hospital, so you want to have this weird, like, creepy sterilization sort of like tone going. Like, I mean, sterile in a way where it just feels like there's nothing. It feels like it's devoid of actual mood, because and it just feels like a fundamental failure of the filmmakers that they don't actually know how to create a feeling. They don't know how to create a tone. So when you have no drive, you have no real tone, you have no interesting characters, what are you left with? You're left with nothing. You're left with just watching things happen because things need to happen.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. And then I mean, I guess maybe the few times it seems like something is gonna happen, it always turns out to be a dream sequence.
Oh god, the movie does that twice in the first 4 minutes. We do the creepy thing is happening, wake up. Creepy thing still happening, wake up again. And not the last time it does it either. There's a few times it does it in this movie. I suppose once they establish that he has nightmares, I don't suppose I can be as angry about the later ones because it has established he's a character who has recurring nightmares, but still F you movie. It's such an overplayed trope at this point. I can't not be annoyed at it. If the rest of the movie was good, then I'd forgive it, but obviously it's not. So.
But I feel like you gotta pick one. It's like, all right, so is he being like tormented by these nightmares, or is this actually a freaky house that's doing something to him? And it's like, I don't know, pick one or the other, or at the very least, maybe you get one like dream sequence in good faith. But yeah, it feels like there's so many in this movie.
Especially when you get to that weird point where they're both kind of real and nightmares, like they're kind of really happening, but they're also nightmares, and it's this weird,
like what's the point?
Yeah, it's this murky middle ground. It's this
is real bad. This like feels worse than, again, just like a shitty studio movie that you see in the middle of the year that you kind of just like, all right, whatever. Like, I don't know. This feels like at least maybe like other stuff that's like boring or generic, but I don't know. At least maybe they're trying to go for something or still have some basic formula. Like, this feels like, I don't know, there's just like nothing to it. Like, I don't know. It's I really, really did not like it.
Well, I think we want to talk about what actually happens. So I suppose we'll give the spoiler warning. Although before I do that, I will thank our Patreon producers for the month. So thank you to Alison M. Fordyce, Tyler Hess, Cindy Palacios, David Short, Board Now, and Zammer Jammer. Thank you to you all. They are all $20 and above patrons, which is why they're producers. But you can support us for as little as $1 per month on patreon.com/MailFizTV. And for that $1, you'll get a bonus exclusive episode of Screams After Midnight every month. And at the $5 tier, should you wish to go there as well, you can get access to voting for an episode every month and early access to every movie review episode of Screams by 1 day. So go and have a look and see if you want to support all the content that we put out and keep all of it coming and get some bonuses for your trouble. So go have a look-see. But yeah, full spoilers for You Should Have Left from henceforth. So, I mean, I almost want to just start talking about the fact that when Kevin Bacon goes to see his wife on set at the start of the movie, the guy he talks to is wearing a Furious 7 hat the whole time. And I mean, don't get me wrong, it does make it real that there's just random like old bits of merch on these people because, obviously people who work in movies end up with lots of random merch from movies they've worked on before. It makes complete sense. But it also like almost distracted me because it was just so random that it was a Furious 7 hat. Like, Fast and the Furious 7, really. That's the merch this guy just happens to be wearing. Very odd. But yeah, where do we want to start? I mean, do we start with the end and work our way back based on like what it's actually about?
I think for this movie, it's probably the best way to go about it.
I kind of like. It's very clear that whatever psychological problems that he's got, he has before he goes to the house because he has that one nightmare at the start, and it's very clear the creepy guy who's talking to the daughter, because that's what the nightmare is that it's this creepy guy with makeup and stuff, but it's very clearly Kevin Bacon, right? It's very clearly him still playing this character, and he's talking to the daughter, and then she sort of wakes up from the nightmare, and then Kevin Bacon wakes up from the nightmare after that. So it's very clear, and then once we hear about his backstory that his wife died, seemingly from an overdose, an intended suicide overdose in a bathtub, it becomes very clear that this is probably about the guilt of her dying, and possibly even that he didn't intentionally let her die or kill her, and this is about his guilt. And the movie kind of plays with the idea later on that the house is kind of like something the devil built, and takes in the souls of people who are deserving to be taken, and that's why it attracts him to the house.
Yes, so essentially, like, it ends up being like a house where, yeah, like if you're guilty of a crime, or I don't know if it's like specifically like you're guilty and you got away with it, like you're drawn to this house, and once you're there, you can't leave, which like isn't a horrible idea. Like that's
My Silent Hill.
Yeah, oh, that's true. Yeah,
The Silent Hill. That's that quick concept.
But like it just feels like it's so out of nowhere though. Like by the time you realize it, that like at the end, because it's not like the whole thing with like the wife's death and everything. Like they mention it a few times, but it never feels like that's a point of the movie, because it's not like something that like they're really constantly dealing with, and then you kind of get the idea when there's all the like bathtub imagery and stuff like later on, but like I don't know, it never feels like that's what the movie's about. So by the end, when you're supposed to get this like revelation, it's like, well, he never seemed like a character that was dealing with guilt or that had this darkness or whatever. And it's also weird because he actually does seem like kind of a good guy, you know? Like I think like he never really seems like, like he's that bad of a father, or like like he has like some like maybe some jealousy issues later on in the movie, but then I feel like when you're being like kind of tortured by the house, like you kind of like understandably would start to go crazy, but like I don't know, like he seems like an okay guy. So then by the end, when you find out like, oh no, he's a piece of shit, it's like, well, it didn't seem like he was ever really struggling or dealing with it throughout the movie.
I mean, I guess I slightly disagree, just in the sense that I thought it was pretty obvious the whole movie was going to be about his guilt from quite early on. It was just because it was him listening to these tapes about how to deal with these nightmares. I just the nightmares had to be because of like his repressed feelings about something, and it just as soon as we found out about the murder, it was like, or the possible murder, it was like, okay, it's clearly about this. I do agree that it doesn't actually focus on it enough. It doesn't actually do enough with it, but it was kind of obvious that it was always going to go down that path eventually. It just kind of like my thing with it is that all the stuff that happens with the house, all the creepy, like the geometry of the house changing and it becoming like a maze, and all that stuff where the daughter ends up missing for a while and he's trying to find her later on in the movie, is that all that stuff feels very kind of just randomly there so they can do other horror movie stuff, because obviously if they just get to the point, the movie's only going to be like an hour long, even less than that maybe. And his realization, because it's so obvious that this more evil looking character that we see vaguely in the basement every so often, the creepy guy who's supposedly taking photos of them while they're sleeping, it's so obvious that that's also Kevin Bacon, which is the other reason why it was clearly about his guilt, is that this is meant to be the representation of his dark side, his darker self, whatever you want to call it. And so when we get to the end, and because one of the things that felt the most random to me in this is that once he starts like chasing his daughter around the house when she's lost, and it's becoming this maze where hallways are just, he's opening doors and he's getting into hallways that are even longer, and it's becoming this weird thing that he can't get around, is that we start doing this weird time thing where he starts like witnessing events from earlier in the movie, where he's seeing them arrive, he's seeing himself at his journal, because one of the mysteries, if you want to even call it that, halfway through the movie, is that someone in his journal has written "you should have left," and it's actually him from the future who writes it in the book. Why is there a weird future thing happening? I do not know. It doesn't make any sense. It never really feels like it fits into the narrative of the movie. If there is some weird justification for this that I'm not seeing, they did not put it in the film. It doesn't come across in any way.
I don't think so. And the house doesn't really feel like intimidating. Like it doesn't really seem like it does anything that scary. Like there's a lot of weird stuff going on. Like there's like these there's these time jumps, and there's these things where like it'll switch like the the room you're going into, or like make these corridors like appear and vanish, or you might end up in a basement that's not supposed to be there, or like the big thing, like I feel like they wanted to be freaky in the trailer was like the oh, this room is bigger on the inside than the outside or whatever. But like,
and it's worth mentioning, all this creepy stuff really doesn't start happening until after the wife, after Amanda Seyfried leaves, because they have a fight because Kevin Bacon, not too long before this, when he's kind of mad at her because she's like always on her phone and stuff, he kind of gets a little bit jealous and he decides to check her phone and her laptop when she's in the bath, and it's kind of this, it's this like, it feels a bit shitty, but it's like he's looking through this stuff. But there is this kind of moment of relief when he looks through her messages and there's nothing there. There's nothing suspicious. There's anything to actually care about. And he's kind of has this moment of like, oh, I'm being an idiot. I'm, whatever. But then the next day he sees her outside with her phone and he's like, I'm going to text her and say, you and the kid look cute out there. And then when he does it, he hears vibrations from inside the kitchen. And it becomes clear that she has two phones. She has an entire second phone. She's Walter Whiting it, as it were. And he confronts her about it. And without even kind of denying or trying to explain it, just kind of openly admits that it's this guy that she worked with a movie on that she's having some sort of affair with. And it's kind of just this awkward scene because we don't really care about the characters that much. And he's confronting her, and he's been kind of paranoid, but it's hard to be completely mad at him when he was right. Like, she has been having an affair, and she gets kind of mad at him for like, why aren't you just yelling at me like a normal person? Why are you being so kind of quiet and awkward about it? And like, well, you're cheating on him. It's not like you don't get to dictate how he reacts to it. It's kind of a weird complaint. So it's kind of an odd thing in terms of like caring about this relationship, because it's presented in such a weird kind of, I don't know, almost subdued way where they kind of bicker, they kind of are mad at each other, and she's going to drive away, she's going to leave for a night so they're separate for a night, and he's going to keep the daughter with him, and that's when all the weird stuff starts happening. And what was weird to me though is that I actually thought it was quite obvious that most of this was probably in his head, that this was all his guilt, all the weird stuff that's been happening is all in his dreams. But once the wife's away, all this stuff starts happening around the daughter, and the daughter is seeing the basement area. The daughter does see like duplicates of Kevin Bacon like watching him from the window. The daughter does see a lot of weird things, and my only real sort of explanation for it, and the point that kind of the evil Kevin Bacon tries to make to him to convince him that he should stay at the end, is that if you stay around your daughter, your dark past will consume her too. So the idea being that she's seeing all this weird stuff in the house, because even though it is all coming essentially from him and his guilt, it is also really happening. It's not just completely in his head. It's not just him hallucinating, because his daughter is experiencing it as well. And the idea is that all of his mistakes, all of his trauma, all of his baggage will extend to her. So he has to kind of willingly give her up and sort of let her go with her mum at the end. Because that's the thing, when Amanda Seyfried shows up at the end to pick up the kid the next day, like, he hasn't even mentioned to her that there's been weird stuff happening. He's just at this point accepted that he has to stay here as punishment, and he admits to her at the end of the movie, I'll let her die. He didn't like premeditate like murder or anything like that, but he could have saved his wife. He came home, saw her in the bathtub, and chose to let her die. And the double meaning of the movie is finally revealed, because obviously we read you should have left, and it's like, oh, you should get out of the house because it's scary and it's spooky and it's going to do things to you. But it's actually him, it's like a double meaning of him saying he should have left his marriage years before he was willing to let her die, because he was always unhappy, and he should have admitted to that to himself and have left. So deep inside here somewhere, there's an interesting premise of like someone admitting that they should have acknowledged the relationship was bad before they became something awful and let this bad thing happen. They essentially destroyed themselves by not recognizing the relationship that was doing this to them. And it's an interesting, like, potentially nuanced look at, again, someone who let someone die, and then the realization that they became someone who was willing to do that because they were that unhappy, because they became that, like, just that spiteful, that hateful to a person, and that admission that they became that, and realizing that the mistakes they made to become that. Like, there's actually there's some potential in that premise somewhere, I think. This movie doesn't have any of it, but there is something there.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think it's like, it's kind of strange because, like, you never get any idea or sense of, like, what his, his, like, ex-wife, was like, and what their relationship was like. So, yeah, by the time, you get to this end here, where you get this revelation, and yeah, he's going on like, yeah, I wasn't happy in the marriage. I should have left. Blah blah blah. But it's like, all right, but I mean, there's it just feels like so kind of like, out of nowhere. Like, all right, well, we didn't really have these kind of like questions or anything before, but I don't know, it's supposed to be a big revelation, and I'm also just kind of curious, like, why this was like such a big like news story or whatever, to the point where like everyone knows who he is, because like it seems like
there's an offhand line from Seyfried at one point about how he was a rich banker, so it became a high profile case because of how rich he was, basically.
All right, but it's not like it's not like it was something where like mysterious, where she shot herself, but then his fingerprints were on the gun, or something like that. You know what I mean? It seems like, all right, well, yeah, she like accidentally drowned in a bathtub. It doesn't seem like something that it's not like he, like, I could understand if it was something like where he like held her down or whatever, and then people are like, oh, like she drowned, but she had like imprints on her neck or something, or it seemed like there was a struggle, but I don't know, it kind of seems like I don't know, a case that wouldn't have been such a big deal. But I mean, again, I just think it's kind of weird, and then also weird, like, all right, well, how the hell did you end up marrying this like young actress after that? I don't know.
Yeah, that part's definitely weird. The thing is, I don't think we necessarily need to like see much of this past relationship or anything. I think there's part of the way that the story could have been told if it was done properly is that you show his growing paranoia, and I think it's kind of an interestingly like wrong choice to me to have to have the wife to turn out to actually be cheating on him, because I feel like the whole point of the ending, again, in a movie where this actually makes sense and works, because the core idea isn't a bad one, is that the character should essentially realize that he's growing spiteful again, that there's a chance of a repeat of the life that he had before, where he thinks he's married again and he thinks that he's having a happy life, but that growing resentment that he had before that led him not to the point of necessarily killing, but of letting someone die, that kind of is there, and any kind of like path to healing or path to recognizing your own flaws, it starts with that realization of what is causing it and what makes you become that type of person, and why are you spiteful, why do you feel this way. And I think the story doesn't need to actually show us what his life was like with his first wife. It doesn't need to show us that at all. Just the hints of how it ended is all we really need, because we can see through this relationship that it is becoming the same thing again. We can see that this is what we can tell what happened the first time through it happening the second time, and that can be the story, and how that can be the engaging part, because we can kind of like start to piece together what this past life was like based on how he's becoming in this time. But because they make the choice to actually have her be someone who is, completely is cheating on him, like there's no gray area there necessarily in terms of the actual, like, he, and okay, yeah, we can go into the idea that maybe because of the way he is, it's driven her to seek out other comforts from other people, but it does murk it up in this weird way where, like, okay, he's resentful, but most people are resentful when someone cheats on them. This is kind of a natural response to such a thing. So that's kind of a weird element to it, but
like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but when he when he's talking about his past marriage and everything, all he really says is that he was unhappy, right? Like he doesn't say like we don't know that if his wife cheated on him or anything, right?
No, we don't know the details. No.
Because I mean, I like I get what you're saying, like about how you kind of learn about what it was like by the stuff that's happening now, but I don't know. I think it's kind of weird if you're gonna mirror those situations, but again, I don't really know. It's like, all right, well, was he unhappy because he thought she was cheating on him?
Well,
too,
to be clear,
what?
I'm saying we should learn it that way. I'm not saying this movie actually does that.
Oh, right. Yeah. No, yeah, like I get what you mean. Like, yeah, I agree with that. But yeah, it's weird. Everything about this just feels really muddled and like I don't know.
I'll
I just
be
don't
honest.
think it's.
It feels like there's a good idea, and then a complete hack wrote the script. So I hate
Sure.
to be mean to Koepp here, but I feel like he just doesn't know how to write a script, and the story doesn't come together. None of the elements actually feel like they click into place. It all just feels like a haphazard, like mishmash of the things that are supposed to form this story. Like, because honestly, like I would argue that this isn't really supposed to be a horror movie. I mean, maybe you can still do the horror angle to it and make it work, but what this really should be is kind of an exploration of this man's like secret and his guilt and why he's so obsessed with how his daughter sees him. Because I think that's the other thing that should feel like a strong element to the movie. Like he's really concerned at one point when he finds out that his wife has explained, because the daughter starts asking questions about why other people don't like her dad that much. And Amanda Seyfried basically tells her the story, and it's how we find out kind of what happened. And when he finds out that she's done all this, he gets really mad at her, and he's really concerned about how his daughter like looks at him now. He's worried that she'll look at him and be scared, or look at him like he's a monster or anything like that. And there's, dare I say, almost a sweet moment where everyone's like really quiet and awkward at the dinner table, where the daughter kind of puts her hand on his hand, and he's kind of like, he has this moment of like, I don't know, like relief or of feeling the love of his daughter, and it comforts him. And even the idea that the reason why he makes the right choice in the end, again, in a better version of this movie, is because of his daughter, because that's opened his eyes enough to see, okay, he has to acknowledge who he is and why he becomes the worst version of himself, because he doesn't want to be that around his daughter, because he wants to be better for his daughter. There's actually a really solid potential character drama at the center of this that could be a good movie. There really is. Yeah. But this movie doesn't actually have any of it click together. This movie doesn't actually explore any of those ideas. It's just there to be it wants to pretend that it's a smart movie. It wants to have this at the end and feel like it's doing this smart thing where it was all about him, like he should have left his wife years ago. It's the guilt of that, and like honestly, the idea is solid. The problem is that the movie's not built up to this at all, and the actual horror elements feel so tacked on and lazy that they don't feel like they belong to the same movie. I mean, if the actual horror elements felt like they thematically tied into what his guilt was, if they actually felt like, I mean, the closest it gets, I suppose, is the idea of like this other version of himself is his darker self, and it's him like recognizing that and sort of admitting to it. I mean, hell, you could do something really interesting here where he actually truly believed he had no part in her death, but this was about him realizing that he did actually have a part in her death by choosing not to act. Like, you could do some sort of like realization of his own like guilt, like where he waved it off before and convinced himself that he was not to blame, but this was him admitting that actually he could have saved her, he did do something wrong, admitting that he at least was an accessory to murder, if nothing else. There's potential interesting character beats to be played from and I have no idea if the book's any good. Maybe the book actually does all these things and the movie just completely balls it all up. That's entirely possible, but I don't know.
I could like see something like that. Like maybe, they have more, they go into more interesting angles, and then this is just a case of someone taking a interesting idea and then just really not doing anything remotely interesting or exciting about it. I do think
it's as if like it's as if Michael Bay remade Night of the Living Dead and removed all of the subtext and removed everything that makes that movie. Actually, no. Why am I even saying that? It's like if Zack Snyder remade Dawn of the Dead. which actually happened, and it removes
Yeah.
all of the subtext, it removes all of the nuance that makes Dawn of the Dead a satire of a horror film, and instead is just, oh, this looks cool because there's zombies and they're biting and it looks cool and it's flashy and there's violence and that's all it is. And admittedly, that movie's not as bad as this one is, but like you get the point I'm making, is that it doesn't actually have any of the actual weight behind it, but wants to pretend that it does.
Yeah, like you get the idea. It's it definitely is not as smart as they intend it to be. Yeah, because just nothing feels impactful, or there's never any point where I was like, oh wow, that just blew my mind. I can't believe it. It's like, no, it's all very dull and lifeless. And like even the house itself, I think, is pretty uninteresting to look at. Like like you kind of mentioned like sterile before, like not that like it should have been like a big creepy castle or something, but at least something like that would have atmosphere. Like, yeah, this does just feel like kind of a boring house, even when they're doing like endless corridors or creepy basement steps. Like it just feels pretty boring.
Yeah, there's nothing really distinct about it. Nothing really stands out as being memorable or just. Yeah, there's nothing to it. There's just nothing to it. And there's some weird elements. Like there's a whole scene where Kevin Bacon like goes to buy like groceries at one point, because he wants to get stuff. And we have this weird almost comedy scene of him like interacting with the well shopkeeper, who is like really quiet and slow and like goes and gets everything he asks for one by one. And then when he eventually does start talking to him, he kind of like speaks really quickly, and Kevin Bacon's like, I don't speak Welsh, and the guy's like, it's English, and he's just speaking really fast, and and it feels kind of, and he's basically just there so that later on, because he implies that he knows something about the house, so then later on when Kevin Bacon, the weird stuff's actually happening, he phones him and he gives him some exposition about how, well, they said there was a house before that, and before that there was the Devil's Tower, and it's been no matter how many times they take it down, a new thing gets built, and the devil will always keep building the new tower.
Weird. Like,
it was a really weird exposition dump in a movie that, like, I don't know if it needed one.
It doesn't feel like, that is for this kind of movie. I am like a little interested by these townsfolk that just know that they live near like some weird devil house.
Well,
like,
the problem with this is that all that stuff, because there's like a random woman outside the car as well when he comes out the shop that sort of implies stuff too. And the problem with all this is that this actually sets it up as if, no, there's just like a creepy haunted house that everyone's got heard rumors about. But the story itself is such a personal, like, realization of who he is, that it just doesn't feel like it belongs in the same movie. It feels like it's just trying to mesh two things together. And let's be honest here, the biggest problem I've not even talked about yet, all these things add up to making a movie that is so boring.
Oh yeah, very boring.
That's problem number one, I suppose. But essentially what we've done is we've tried to analyze why it's so goddamn boring, and these are the reasons. I mean, I suppose on top of that, the technical qualities aren't exactly that. I mean, it's not like technically faulty like The Darkness is, but there's nothing interesting in the direction. There's no interesting camera work. There's no like inspired choices when it comes to the music, or like how it captures
style.
Yeah,
it's like no style, no atmosphere.
Yeah, that's
nothing.
Basically it. And look at the creepy stuff. Like probably the biggest kind of like creepy kind of set piece is, well, outside I suppose of the naked like dead wife like attacking Kevin Bacon at one point. That's probably the most over the top moment. But basically after the whole maze like stuff where he lost a daughter, they do find each other, and like, you know what, we don't have the car, we can't get a hold of your mother, we're just going to walk. And he gets the jacket on, he gets the scarves on, it's going to be quite cold outside. And he just keeps walking in the same direction, but eventually, this is one of the biggest like moments where, like, this movie's just failing completely. Is that he's like, oh, I see lights up ahead. We're finally getting somewhere. We're finally getting to the town. And you're like, they're just back at the house. They've somehow just went full circle. That's the creepiness. It's the Blair Witch, right? It's the going in one direction but ending up back at the same place. And so he takes a few more steps, and then he realizes where he is, and he says, "We're back." And the daughter looks around. And it's like, and it plays it like this creepy moment. I'm like, you know what, like, and it's not that being predictable is a bad thing. The problem is though is that it's predictable, and I'm like, oh, gee, they're back at the house. Like, I'm so shocked.
The thing is, like, it takes, and like I feel like there's like a couple examples, and like I mentioned before, like the whole thing with like the clock and everything, but you know what's going on, but the movie takes so long to get there and for the people to realize it. And yeah, like I don't think it's necessarily would have been like a terrible scene or whatever, but yeah, as you're watching, you're like, all right, I know they're back at the house, just let's go, let's get there, let's do it. But yeah, it feels like it's really taking its time and trying to milk it to kind of build up this creepy revelation when you already know like what's going on 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, and then the other thing, just to go back to the ending again, when he's admitting to his wife that he let his previous wife die, and he's talking about what actually happened, and he's being very calm, and he's saying that no, he belongs here now. Which, by the way, I thought it was weird that she never questions that line, because he says, "No, I belong here. This is where I belong." What, you belong in this rented Welsh country house? What? She has no context. She doesn't know this is the devil's like I don't know, pit of despair.
Yeah, like when they meet up in the morning, and he's like, no, take her, I'm gonna stay. Like it feels like it's meant to be like the end of a haunted house movie where like the person's like, no, I belong with the house now. But you're totally right, like she just kind of seems like she just accepts it and understands what's going on.
Yeah, keep in mind she left before any of the creepy stuff. She's not seen any, I mean really any of the creepy stuff at all. To her, nothing weird's happened. It's just normal marital problems, and that's it. So it's weird that she doesn't question that line. But I mean, her reaction though, when he's explaining what he did, and that, you know, she's a little bit scared for a second when he admits that he killed her, and then hears the rest of it, and then her reaction is very much of someone who is like, okay, feeling a lot of emotion of what she's been told. But this is why it was clear to me at this point that really what this wants to be is a metaphor or analogy for someone who is acknowledging their problems and that they need help, and like coming to terms with their past mistakes. And because her reaction to this is almost like a sweet one, where she kind of smiles and she asks him again to come with them, and says, and kind of understands that he's acknowledging his past, and that he's actually, you know, on a path to recovery or help or whatever. And I felt like her reaction here, because of the way she plays it, it kind of like just like cemented what the movie wants to be here and is failing miserably to do. It was her reaction that really sold it for me, is because that's just what this scene wants to feel like. It wants to be that. And I felt like this moment makes all the horror kind of almost irrelevant, because it's not really what the movie was about. The horror was just a manifestation of something, as opposed to, you know, whatever. But
that is like kind of a bad message though, if it is him like finally being able to admit that he needs to take responsibility and get help, and then their reaction is to like leave. Like that's kind of weird.
Well, I think the bigger problem is the fact that if this is like an analogy for that, then the idea that he then, because if you're taking this as like not, I don't know if I'd quite say it's representing rehab or
sure,
representing like therapy or representing, but the idea that he's now deciding to stay in a place that he can never leave is kind of in saying that he could never get better. It's kind of him, you know, it's that kind of implies that once you've realized that you've been bad, or you've realized your faults, that you can never actually recover from it. Which actually takes away from the almost the positive vibe from her reaction to what he's saying. Because the ending of the movie is that like some time passes, and then the website that has the, you know, the rental, like, you know, bookings says that it's free to rent again. And I don't know if that implies that he's gone into the house and that's just now him there, or did he leave because he's gotten over it. he's been through his therapy and understands himself. I mean, I don't know. That's where the Silent Hill comparisons kind of came. This idea that Silent Hill is a place that you're drawn to because you have this this guilt, or you have this thing that you've done that you have to address. So, but I didn't think when I started watching this movie that at the end of it I'd be making a reference to Silent Hill or a comparison to Silent Hill, but here we are. There is actually a valid comparison to make. Obviously not in the way it looks or feels or how it handles its story, but there is something there in the core of it to compare it to.
Yeah, the difference with Silent Hill though is like you might have questions at the end, but they're more like, ooh, like, oh, I wonder, like, you know, like you're kind of curious about like what the place and what happened to me, what happens to the characters. With this, you have questions, but it's just more of like, who cares? Like, like
Well,
it's like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah.
I don't know if this makes sense, but I also don't give a shit about it.
No, I mean, because no, I mean, the best way to sort of talk about this is just like, okay, you've got your David Lynch movie essentially, which is completely weird and mysterious, but you always get the feeling that the person making it, like, has a clear idea of what this is, and you always feel like there is the answers are in there. If you keep digging, you can theorize, and it's thought provoking. That's the best way to put it. It's thought provoking. Whereas this is not thought provoking. This is why did the director make this choice? Why did the writer write this in the script? Why are these things happening? Not in a way that's like intriguing, in a way that's like, why did they think this worked? Why why is this? Just, yeah.
Like another thing too. Like again, just you can tell the movie really wants to, be seen as smart and stuff. And like I feel like they're trying to have like a theme of like pictures and mirrors and stuff in it. Like, to the point, like towards the end of the movie, there's like just like a weird throwaway line where I think is it maybe the evil Kevin Bacon like says something like, that's the problem with a mirror, like when you look at it you're the one looking back, or like something stupid like that. And it's like trying so hard to, I don't know, like have some type of theme or motif with this stuff, but again, it just feels like it's kind of slapped on there haphazardly, and there's nothing like, actually intriguing about it.
Yeah. Basically everything about the movie's undercooked, and I mean that at a fundamental level. Every conceptual idea of this film, every thematic, every character idea of this movie is undercooked. It feels like a script that was written by a first-year college student who just threw it together in a week, and no one ever
redrafted it. Not by the guy
it.
that wrote Jurassic Park.
No, no one redrafted it. No one ever went through it and sort of made notes. No one ever thought about how to make it better. It was a first rush draft that just feels cobbled together and isn't even close to actually succeeding in anything that it's trying to achieve. And it's not even an interesting failure. It's not like, sometimes you look at these movies and it's like, oh, wow, this was a complete misfire, but let's analyze why it's such a misfire. It just feels incompetent.
Yeah.
And it's boring incompetence. It's not fun incompetence, and that just makes it worse.
Yeah, this is a very bad movie, but it's not like a fun bad movie you could watch with friends and make fun of and stuff. Like, this would be painful, to watch with someone.
You should have left a painful experience.
Yeah. That's what the joke I made online was like that luckily the theaters aren't open, because like every review would have been like, you should have left ... the theater.
You're right, they would all be saying that. Hey, it might still be playing at drive-ins. I feel like it probably is.
Maybe, yeah.
Seems like the sort of thing that they'd put out in the drive-ins. I feel like this is a movie where someone goes, I've not been to a theater, I'm going to go into a drive-in. They'll go and see this movie and go, you know what? I never want to go to a theater again. It was a mistake. The whole thing was a mistake. This is
like, imagine if theaters were open and then like you went there and contracted COVID, contracted the virus for this this piece of shit.
Imagine this was the one you risked it for and you got it.
Jesus.
Oh dear. No, I
assume this was supposed to be in theaters.
Yes, right? I think so.
Like, you think? Yeah.
No, if I remember correctly, Blumhouse had like an untitled like movie set for May. I think this was it. I think this was probably the movie that was supposed to come out in theaters in May. And then obviously everything happened and they pushed it and then just put it out VOD. Because it was obviously one of the lower profile movies, despite the fact that it has some stars in it. It was clearly not one that they were expecting a big thing out of.
The star of Friday the 13th himself couldn't save this movie. Nope. That's pretty much it. This feels like a movie that should have come out in January. It feels it's of that quality. It's this crappy little movie that has no... Because what's so sad about horror is that when it's great, and a lot of the great horror movies are these low budget movies, some of the most famous movies of all time in the horror genre are the low, we can do it. We're just going to do it because we have the talent and we can. But what's so frustrating is that
all the good ones are good because they're not only because there's talent, but mostly because they're creative. Because they're trying to do something genuine and interesting and new and exciting, and they want to create a feeling. And then you have at this other end these Hollywood low budget like pieces of shit that are just going through the motions and doing everything without any thought, and it's just I don't know. It's just that I don't want to say it's easy because it's not. Making movies is hard, right? Making a good movie is even harder. But given that all the good ones, for the most part, are also just as low budget. The fact that, like, you have these types of movies that are so bad, are just, I don't know. There's no like, passion. There's no heart behind this. There's no one cared about what they were doing in this movie.
Oh yeah, no, 'cause, like sometimes there are movies that I don't like, but I do feel kind of bad ragging on it because you can see that. It was made with like a heart and passion and stuff. This is one of those ones where it's just like, no, screw this movie. Like, I don't care.
This was churned out of the Hollywood factory. There's no passion here whatsoever. Yeah, so we've got his untitled, not untitled, but we've got his Bride of Frankenstein to look forward to. He's also writing Indiana Jones 5. Just in case you were excited for that.
I mean, did people really want the writer of Indiana Jones 4 to come back?
Yeah. Interestingly, he did direct Premium Rush, which I actually kind of liked that movie. But that actually might be the best movie he's got on his whole filmography.
I mean, I don't know. Like he has like written some big movies and stuff. Like I don't want to say he's like not talented, but I don't know. Does he just need like a good director to take his stuff in?
I mean, yeah. He wrote Panic Room. He wrote obviously Jurassic Park. He wrote, he's written some movies that became good. But yeah, maybe it is just the direction. Sometimes it's maybe just that the premise is solid in the first place. And it's worth mentioning that Jurassic Park is based on a book. It's worth mentioning that Mission Impossible is based on a show. There's a solid footing there. But of the movies he's directed about 10 things. Well, 7 actual full-length movies. I think, Premium Rush is the only one out of the ones I've seen that are worth a damn. Because I never saw Ghost Town with Ricky Gervais, but I don't think it was meant to be that good. I never saw Star of Echoes or Secret Window, but I've never heard anything good about these movies.
Secret Window's really bad.
There you go. See,
that might have to be a bonus movie we do at some point.
Oh god, yeah. Premium Rush, if you don't remember, that is the action movie with Joseph Gordon-Levitt on a bike, and he's been hunted by corrupt cops around the city. Honestly, it's a fun little action movie. It's not high art by any means, but there was a solid fun time.
I never saw it, but I do remember when it came out, people were actually were saying like, oh no, this is actually pretty fun. So
yeah, you got Joseph Gordon-Levitt. The villain's Michael Shannon. It's
cool.
It's all right. It's so competent that it's surprising that David Koepp is the director. So. But hey, so I guess we're done talking about You Should Have Left. I will ask Tim the question: what are you rating it out of 10?
I'm just gonna give it a straight up 2. Because like if you think about it, like like once you start getting like really really low, I usually like to try to think of like, all right, was there stuff in this movie that I like that can boost the score up a little bit? And I honestly cannot think of anything that I thought the movie actually did well, or like because sometimes even a bad movie be like this was bad, but this one scene I really liked, or this one actor gave a really good performance. Like I mean the actors in this are fine, but they're not doing anything interesting.
The script doesn't really give them anything to work with. So, but obviously Amanda Seyfried and Kevin Bacon are actual actors, so they're not terrible either. And I think like you've said before. When stuff is like this low, like the only reason why it's not a 1 is because you can still follow the movie. Like it's not like dialogue just drops out, or like they cut a scene in the middle of someone's sentence. Like it is still made on a technical level that makes it watchable, even though you won't want to watch it. It has some proper the acting can be worse and the technical qualities can be worse. Therefore, I think a 2 out of 10 is very fair.
Yeah.
I'm going to also say 2 out of 10 for those reasons. But it fundamentally fails in being a atmospheric or creepy horror movie. It fundamentally fails in the deeper character drama of regret and guilt that it wants to be. It is implying that it is, but it doesn't succeed in any of it. And then it's just painfully boring to actually watch. So, yeah. You Should Have Left is a movie that should have been left in the cutting room floor.
Agreed.
There you go. That is it.
And this is like one of the first movies we've done in a long time. I feel like where we're actually doing something like the weekend of the release.
It's been a while. Yeah.
Usually we have like staggered releases, or we're not able to get to something right away. So it felt fun. I was excited that we are gonna do something timely, and then it was this.
Yeah, I think we'll try and do that as often as we can. It's just unfortunate that sometimes this is what we get. So, but yes, that is You Should Have Left. You can let us know what you thought of the movie in the comments. In fact, if you made it this far in the review, you can leave the word bacon in the comments to let us know that you got this far. You can also, of course, liking is really important on YouTube. It lets the algorithm know that you would recommend us out to other people, and it'll do so. It is the easiest way for you to support us. Of course, you can also support us financially, as we mentioned earlier, with patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, and get some bonuses. Get us on Twitter at Screams Midnight for updates and shenanigans, and I know Tim was using it to tease how bad this movie was just last night at the time of recording. So you'll get the odd tease like that as well. So go and have a look on there. As far as that goes, I mean, I've actually promoted all this stuff for a while, so I'll say go check out the Atomic Cinema Experiment. It is the science fiction sister to this podcast, which I do with Tara, and it's good fun. Sometimes there's a little bit of overlap in the movie type, because of course it's a lot of sci-fi horror. And so go have a look. But otherwise, that is us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, guys, and we will see you next time.